Hi everyone, welcome back to the audit and attestation class. In this class, we'll be understanding how to use the work of internal audit. So let's dive into for more detail.
Yeah, there you go. Work of internal audit. Who is internal auditor? What's your understanding? Who is internal auditor? Any idea?
Sir, internal auditor is it can be an in-house setup of a company that can help them with their internal audit piece, or it can be it can be a third party that they have hired to provide that services.
Yeah. Whom they report?
To the audit committee.
To
the management.
To the management.
Yes, to the management.
Right?
Yes.
Right. So what is like generally they do?
So they primarily do a similar set of exercise wherein they are looking into both operating and financial controls, and they're doing independent testing to ensure that the internal control setup is operating effectively. Yeah. So that's what they perform.
Yeah, it's very good question. Like I think you covered three major points over here. One is like internal audit. Internal audit can be internal team within the company. If the companies are big, generally they have their own internal audit team. But for small or mid-sized company, they may hire like third-party consultant to to conduct the internal audit. Second important thing is like what exactly they do. What is the scope of work? They do audit of both, like operational control and financial. You can say financial reporting related controls as well. Whereas as an external auditor, we are more focused on the controls around the financial statement, internal control over the financial reporting framework, right? And third major thing is they are reporting to the management, and through management they goes to the reporting to the audit committee in the listed company, but primarily they are reporting to the management. So for them, independence is not mandatory, but for external auditor, independence is something which is mandatory, right? So now let's look at the text over here. Auditor should obtain an understanding of internal audit functions. So as an CPA, as an external auditor, when we are studying audit here, we are studying from the standpoint of view of external auditor, group auditor, statutory auditor, right? We are not studying from the internal auditor standpoint of view. That is more in CIA course. Right. So in CPA course, we will be studying more from the external auditor point of view, right? So auditor should obtain an understanding of internal audit function. First, we need to understand, because like in any audit, first and foremost important thing is understanding the respective process or respective function. Then only you will be in a position to evaluate it better. Then you will be in a position to assess the risk. Then you will be in a position to plan your audit procedure, right? First and foremost step, always be understand the respective process or respective function. So that's what we'll be doing. Auditor should obtain an understanding of the internal audit function sufficient to identify those internal audit activity that are relevant for planning the audit. So here, what we need to do, we need to first understand the overall scope of internal auditor, right? Team of the internal auditor, competency of the internal auditor, work they do, and their qualification, and to whom they are reporting, right? And then from their scope, we need to identify what is relevant for us, right? They might be doing right, left, center, so many things relating to operational, or so many things relating to non-key controls also. But for us, what matters most is the key controls around the financial reporting, right? So, sorry. Okay. Yeah. There you go. Then auditor should evaluate the following if planning to consider the effect of internal auditor work on the audit. So if you are planning to consider the effect of internal audit in your statutory audit, or in your group audit, or in your consolidated financial statement audit, what all things you will be considering. So means over here, when you are like, for example, you are planning to rely on controls, right? And you are taking some level of comfort because of the internal audit team has done some work, right? And you are reducing some of your sample size, or you are relying completely on the internal auditor work, or you're planning to take their assistance in performing your work. So what all things you need to evaluate if you are taking any benefit of the internal audit team or their work? First thing is objectivity of the internal audit function, how objectively that internal audit function work, right? So it should not be that internal audit team is working under the influence of management. How objectively, that means like they have a stake, or you can say they have a right to say wrong to wrong, they have a right to say right to right. Right? It should not be like they're working under the complete pressure of the management and they cannot say wrong to wrong. Right? How objectively the team is working, how objectively internal audit department is functioning, that is something you need to evaluate. Right? How do you evaluate that? You know, that's a professional judgment. It's hard because these are like soft things. Right? These are not the numbers, these are not the values, these are not the amounts, these are the soft skills, or you can say soft areas of audit, which is generally hard to evaluate. But like when you're looking at the overall structuring, whether they are in a position to report to the audit committee or not, right? How is the tone at the top from the management side? Is management is so much dominating that they do not allow internal auditor to connect with different, you can say, team members? Right? They do not allow internal auditor to speak in front of the board of directors. Right? Those all things you need to understand based on your inquiry and looking at the overall environment of the organization. Right? Second thing is competency of the internal audit team. How do you evaluate the competency? Any idea?
Maybe some qualification status of the people who are doing internal audit.
Yes, qualification, like whether the person who is leading the department is qualified CPA, CIA, or maybe like have a relevant experience or not, right? So here you will be evaluating their experience in internal audit, right? As well as their qualification for the internal audit, right? Third thing is due professional care carried out by the internal audit team. So how do you evaluate whether they are working with due professional care or not?
Maybe I'm just giving a guess. Maybe the documentation which they do pertaining to the work papers.
Yeah.
Are they prepared? They are well maintained. They have prepared them well or not?
Yes.
In order of the transactions of the series.
Yeah, absolutely true. So one thing is like, yeah, looking at their documentation, right? Second thing is like participating in walkthrough meetings with them and understand like whether they have questioning mind, whether they are asking relevant question, whether they understand the process properly or not, right? And then reviewing some of their work to understand whether they are work with a due professional care or they are just ticking the box, right? Makes sense? Fourth is effectiveness of communication between internal auditor and external auditor. How effective the communication is between the internal auditor and external auditor, right? And the next is internal audit knowledge of prior years. So in the previous year audit, if the same internal audit team was involved, so their experience also matter in the current year, right? Next is nature and scope of internal audit, internal audit resources. How many staff they have, how many senior they have, how many managers they have, how many directors they have, right? Is the team sufficient to conduct such a big internal audit, or is it team like they have so much big team and it's hard to, you can say, make effective audit? So you need to evaluate both the ways, whether they have sufficient team or not, right? Whether they have always been constraint of team members, then there might be a chances they will accept certain mistake or they will do certain ticking the box exercise as well, right? Just to finish off their work. So that is also you need to understand how many resources they are. Are those resources sufficient to conduct such an audit or not? Next is nature and scope of internal audit. So what all things like what all operational audit they do, what all financial statement audit they do, and what are the key risk area they do. So that's all understanding you need to have. Next is assessing the risk at the assertion level for a particular class of transaction, account balance, and disclosure. How do they assess risk? That is also you need to understand, and accordingly, based on the high risk area or significant risk area which they have identified for the internal audit purpose, what additional procedure they are planning to perform in those areas to mitigate those risks, right? And then degree of subjectivity involved in evaluation of the audit evidence. So how they are evaluating the audit evidence? Same way how we are evaluating audit evidence. Are they using the same methods, methodologies, or you can say way, or are they evaluating things differently than what we expect, or what as an external auditor the expectation should be, right? Any doubts so far? What is internal audit, what they do, why they do, and what as a CPA we need to evaluate?
No, sir. Clear.
Right? Cool. So objectivity, competency, due care, effective communication, prior knowledge, resource, nature and scope, assessment of risk, and degree of subjectivity. So these all things you need to evaluate, and these are mandatory procedure for a statutory auditor if you are planning to rely on the internal audit work, or if you are planning to involve them under the direct assistance approach. Right? Now coming to the use of internal audit work. Like I said, you can use, they can do their own independent work, and then you can use their work and reduce your sample size, right? Or the other way is you can take their team member as your staff and use them, right? In most of the big company, they follow either of these approach, right? And if in some of the company, like for example, I was auditing a company called I think JCB over here in Faridabad. So there, when we were doing their statutory audit, they said for those small risk area, you can involve our internal audit staff in conducting your audit, and you can reduce or limit your fees, right? So sometime when you are negotiating for the fees, like practically I'm sharing an example with you. So when you are negotiating the fees increment and all those stuff with the management, so they if they do not have budget, or they do not want to spend too much on the statutory audit, or they feel like it's too high, then probably next level of discussion come, and they can say we have internal auditor team member, and they are also qualified people. You can use them as your staff for those low risk area. That will reduce your team time, and that you can pass on to us by reducing your fees or keeping your fees consistent with the previous one. So that's what generally I have seen in my practical life, this kind of discussion, not only with JCB, with the couple of other companies, just like GlaxoSmithKline. So we are having the similar arrangement. So we are using 2 of their internal audit team member to work with us for the low risk areas, right? And most of the big companies, for example, Goodyear, General Motors, Amazon, Flip, or then Intel, in those all companies which I have audited, so we were using the Reliance approach, in which they have their own internal audit team who are working on both operational controls as well as control relating to financial statement, right? Then we were identifying the controls relating to the financial statement and the key controls, what work they have done, and we have relied on them, but we have performed all these procedures required to use for the Reliance approach. So first look at left hand side, Reliance approach. If you are planning to rely on the work of the internal audit team, then what all things in addition to above what we have discussed you need to do? First thing is plan review and re-performance by internal audit work. So whatsoever the work relating to the key controls of the financial statement that internal audit team has done, you need to do at least 20% of the re-performance. So this 20% is general rule. It's nowhere mentioned in AICPA. It's all professional judgment. But what I have seen from my experience with PwC and EY, we take generally 20% of the work performed by the internal audit team, and we do re-performance of that. To ensure what work internal audit team has done they have done with the due professional care and in line with our expectation. Make sense? Yes, no, Mr. Bundu?
Yes, sir.
Right? So if you are planning to rely on the work of internal audit, you cannot blindly rely. You need to do at least 20% to 30% of their work as a re-performance to understand what they are doing is right or not, what they are doing is meeting your expectation or not. Make sense? Second is, in case of issuer, rely can be planned on test of control only, but walkthrough is still the responsibility of auditor. So you cannot rely on walkthrough. Walkthrough is something mandatory procedure and you cannot rely on walkthrough. You can do a joint walkthrough, but you cannot completely pass on the walkthrough activity to the internal audit work. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Any question? Why?
Because वही हो गया walk through के केस में तो we have to go through the entire process and everything. And if start auditor will have to do it once actually to understand how the audit, how does he plan that audit, because else he won't be able to. That's what my
Yeah, just breathe, Vineet, Kush. Why internal auditor need to do walkthrough? Oh, why statutory auditor or group auditor, external auditor mandatory to do walkthrough?
So because they need to ensure that they independently understand the overall process flow from initiation to end. So they can't just go with what the internal auditor has done. They will have to gain and obtain that understanding.
Yeah. Because like why we perform walkthrough? What is the objective of performing a walkthrough as an external auditor?
So to understand the critical path, which is initiation, recording, processing, and reporting of a transaction from end to end. So
and validating your understanding of
the
process, right?
Yes.
Unless and until you understand the process and validate the process, how can you define the audit procedure required to perform? Right? That is the reason walkthrough is still being the responsibility of the external auditor. You can rely on test of control by doing certain level of re-performance of the work they have done, but walkthrough is something you need to do mandatorily. Third is
just a quick question. On point one, when we are doing re-performance, we are testing the same attributes or same steps that the internal auditor has done, right? They're not.
That's a very good point. So this is something for the key controls. We do like planning meeting with the internal auditor. This is what the assertion we are looking for, and these are the things we are looking for. So they might have audit plan and you might have audit plan. Both of you need to align so that in one go they can take care of both.
Okay, so we are only re-performing what is actually required.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very good point, Kush. Like I've done a lot of such meeting where we, like when we are especially doing first time audit, like for loyalty rewards company, back in 2013, I was doing first time audit. Like for General Motors, I was doing first time audit. Carbon 3D, I was doing first time audit. Especially in first time audit, it required, or maybe when new controls comes up or new change in control comes out, it's good to align your strategy with the internal audit to avoid the duplication of the work. Yeah, very good point. Thanks, Kush. Ultimate responsibility.
When you say align the strategy, you mean attributes have to be this like consistent between.
Yes. What you need for the statutory audit or external audit purpose, they will be testing at least those, and over and above, it's their choice. Right? Make sense, Nimisha? Good?
Yeah. Fine.
Cool. Okay. Third point is ultimate responsibility. So ultimate responsibility for the control is still lying on the auditor. So you cannot say that I have relied on internal auditor and something went wrong, then I am not responsible. No, because internal auditor is not independent, not mandatory to be independent. And this is your report. So you need to take the ownership of your report. Right? For this, plan not to rely on high and significant risk assertion result into material misstatement. So the area which you have identified as a high risk area, significant risk area, or fraud risk area, in those you will be doing your own testing of controls. there you will not plan to rely on the internal audit work, because those are the area you have identified as high risk, significant, or fraud risk area, right? So there you cannot take any risk on your audit by relying on the internal audit work. Make sense? So far so good for the Reliance approach. What all things you need to do for Reliance approach? You need to check objectivity of internal auditor, competency, due professional care, effective communication, knowledge, resources, nature, scope, assessment of the risk, degree of subjectivity, and then at least you need to test 20% to 30% of the work they have done in alignment with your audit strategy. And at the end, it's being completely your responsibility. Walkthrough is something you cannot delegate, and for the high risk, significant risk, and the fraud risk area, you cannot delegate the work. Simple?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's come to the direct assistants. In direct assistants, you treat their team member as your staff, right? Use the IA team member as your own staff. Give them a direction, and it's being your responsibility to supervise. So your responsibility is both. Give them a direction, like list of tasks, what they need to do, right? And then once they perform, it's being your responsibility to review their tasks. So you can use them as a staff only and only for the execution purpose, because ultimate responsibility will always be yours, right? If ultimate responsibility is of yours, then you need to give them a direction, like these are the steps you need to perform, and then after he or she has performed, it's being your responsibility to review those work, right? Use in walkthrough, test of control, and test of detail. You can use them in the walkthrough, test of control, and test of detail as well. So that's completely available. Whereas for the Reliance approach, you cannot rely on the walkthrough individually performed by the internal auditor. There you need to be there. But here it's being part of your team member. So you can involve them in performing the walkthrough, but you will be reviewing it and you will be attending those walkthrough meetings in addition to that particular staff, right? Same way for the test of control, you will be asking them to execute, but review is your responsibility. Same as the test of control also, right? Make sense? Ultimate responsibility is of auditor. Fifth point is involve in the low risk or less complex area. So you should not involve the internal auditor in high risk, significant risk, or fraud area. You can involve them whether in walkthrough, test of control, test of detail, that's completely your prerogative, but only and only for the low risk or less complex area. And then properly document the nature, timing, and extent of the procedure performed by internal audit team member and how you have ensured the review and supervision of the work performed by internal auditor. So work not documented,
Work not done.
work not done, right? So fifth point clearly says you can involve the internal audit team member in the low risk area, but you need to document the nature, timing, and extent of procedure performed and how you have ensured the review and supervision of the work performed by the internal auditor, right? Last point is recognize that internal auditor is not independent. So this is also you need to mention in your documentation that you have involving in the internal auditor, but internal auditor is not independent to plan the work and review the same. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so quick note over here. Use of internal audit reduce the extent of procedure for auditor, mainly for test of control. However, auditor is responsible for obtaining sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to support the audit opinion. So when you are using internal auditor, it generally reduce some of your work, right? But ultimately, it's your responsibility to sign the balance sheet and sign the financial statement and audit report and audit opinion, right? So you need to ensure the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence you have gathered to reach to the conclusion which you are signing up. Responsibility of the auditor cannot be shared with the internal auditor, and adequacy of the internal audit involvement, risk assessment, procedure, plan, result must be documented, right? So this is about internal auditors, right? Let's do some practice question here. When evaluating the ability of internal auditor An independent CPA should obtain the information about what? What is the call of the question? When evaluating the ability of internal auditor, right? So here you are evaluating the competency of the internal auditor or ability of the internal auditor. What all things should be considered? First is internal auditor preliminary assessed level of control risk. Do you assess the control risk?
No, sir.
No, sir.
We control.
Right? Yes, no?
No.
But sir, in that audit has, it has helping the, like if there is a low risk areas, then they will help it. But in terms of, level of controllers, I don't think that.
The question is only asking about the ability or the competency, which is option 2. The other 3 options does not relate to competency of internal.
Yeah. So call of the question is ability of internal auditor. Right, Kashish?
Yes, sir. Sir, if it's low risk hota, then I think we will consider it. Then.
Stick to question, because if you go right, left, and center, then you'll not be able to answer the question exactly.
Okay, sure, sir.
Well, like this generally happens in exam. Like people think a while, but they dilute the focus on the call of the question. So when you are practicing the question, stick to those questions. What exactly is the call of the question? So this will help you like in exam time also. Like in our mind, a lot of things are going right, left, and center. But at the exam time, we need to focus on the call of the respective question at that moment. Right?
Yes, sir.
So second is quality of internal auditor working paper documentation. So would you evaluate that for the ability of internal auditor? Yes, no, partly yes, partly no.
Yes, so we will evaluate that.
Third is organizational level to which internal auditor report. So does it report to management? Does it report to senior manager? Does it report to board of director? Does it report to audit committee? Will it matter for the ability of internal auditor?
No, sir.
Fourth is policy prohibiting internal auditor from auditing sensitive matters. So for example, management do not want the auditor to test payroll. Would that impact on internal auditor's ability?
No, so
Ability.
So no, because internal auditor is also independent. Like he has the access to all the processes, and he can't be prohibited to audit any area. Also, sir, the question is ability of the internal auditor. So basically, we will check his ability and competency, which we can only check from the his prior year work document as per these options given.
4 options, absolutely right. So key things here, like you may have perfect answer, but that may not be in your option, right? Then you need to select the best right answer in the given options. So that is also like a strategy for examination purpose, right? Next question is, an internal audit may give direct assistance to an independent CPA during an audit in which of the following? First, obtaining an understanding of internal control. Second, obtaining an understanding of internal control, performing test of control, and performing substantive testing procedure. Obtaining an understanding of internal control and performing test of control, and none of the above. So direct assistance approach. Where all you can use direct assistance approach.
So then also that's why it is the second option, because it has because in direct assistance we will be ordering him and supervising him. So we can use him as our staff, which we have just recently studied. So all the tasks we can get performed by him.
Yeah, Kashish, Ayush.
Kamal, but यहाँ पे लिखा है performing substantive test. Substantive तो हमारा actually उसमें होता है, मतलब it's not a part of internal control. No, internal control में तो खाली walkthrough होता है और TOCs होते हैं. substantive to actual audit का part होगा.
What is the call of the question?
Yeah, question is asking an internal auditor may give direct assistance to an independent CPA. So how will it give the direct assistance? Like in all these things, we can directly use the staff of the internal auditor and get all these, tell him the stepwise procedure for like how to check internal control, performing test of control, and all these the stat auditor will be performing, and he will be assisting in all these things. I think that.
Look at
Yes, sir.
this.
Here's a third point.
Yeah, this one. Yes, third point. Right.
Yeah, Nimisha, makes sense.
No, Kamal, because I still think कि internal auditor is not independent. तो अगर independent ही नहीं है, तो आप audit में उसका TOD में assistance ले रहे हो, and then मतलब independence अगर impair हो गई तो फिर engagement की acceptance पे question आ जाता है ना. Engagement
So for that, you will be involving him only in low risk and less complex areas, and you will be doing direct supervision and review of the work performed.
So they'll be really involved in the execution piece, right? Obviously, the accountability has to be taken up by the external auditor of their work.
Yes, yes. So this is allowed as per GAAP.
So finally, it is being actually tested by stat auditor, right? It's reviewing everything, and we are he is already only doing these 3 steps: walkthrough, test of control, and test of details for the
only and only for low risk area and less complex area. For example, like expense testing, like administrative expense testing, interest recalculation. So those kind of small area where like risk is not high, or it's simple mathematical calculation.
And that too in the execution stage. Obviously, ultimately, he will be reviewing. If he doesn't feel right, he can reperform the entire step.
Yeah, yeah. Like for example, rent testing of rent, like recalculation of rent, expenses, normal operational expenses, travel expenses, fuel expenses, those kind of area, interest expenses, interest income, which is like just a mathematical calculation stuff. Right, Nimisha, does that make sense?
Kamal 100% convinced नहीं हो, थोड़ा सा.
Like it's more cost-effective way, right? For example,
I have seen this practically. मतलब मैंने
no, practically I have seen. That's the reason I'm saying for hiring a big 4 company, it's not easy for like any startup or mid-sized company, right? We are expensive for that. So what they do, they said like we have 2 team members in internal audit. You can use them in your low risk areas, and that's how like we reduce the number of hours for the engagement, and we get into their budgets. And we're doing like complete like supervision and monitoring of the work performed by them. So I have done like couple of audit with the direct assistance approach.
Okay. Thanks.
Cool. So which one is right answer?
Second, sir.
Cool. Sounds good.